a particular person like Stanley Kubrick, for instance,
Right.
their work is layered with esoteric meaning because either they have an interest in it as a layman, or they are actually members of esoteric societies and are just frontmen for those Masonic societies. So when you go frame by frame and start looking at the esoteric symbolism in, say, something like Eyes Wide Shut, or even a Spielberg piece of garbage, like oh my God, Back to the Future or whatever this nonsense,
Yeah,
and then you
Close
start.
Encounters apparently had a
Yeah.
lot of it in there.
Exactly. And there's so many other, even now, these latest movies, Immortal, it's all this Nephilim symbolism and what have you. So, yeah, when you go frame by frame, you start noticing all this obviously esoteric stuff. That's because these people are themselves just front men, messengers, so to speak, mercurial messengers for these secret societies who want to put out this esoteric information, but they have learned from a long time back to do it in this play of masks, okay? Now, that doesn't mean that the guy who's trying to earn a living at the end, often they're completely ignorant. I mean, I've even tracked some of these films when the actor is being interviewed about some of the symbolism. I mean, they're totally idiotic. They don't have a clue. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. All I can say is that, yeah, there's a humongous difference between the level of intelligence of a Peter Weir, who would make the Truman Show,
Uh-huh.
and the actor, right? Who, if you ask him later on after the movie's made, so what do you think that meant when you went through a door in the sky? Well, gee, I don't really know,
Yeah,
So
man, I got paid.
exactly, right? They're like performing seals. Later on, they may become a little bit more knowledgeable, and certainly if they want to go on and direct anything, they're going to have to start getting into it. And believe me, I'm the first to say that I'm skeptical about all of these people, actors included. I mean, I am really skeptical about them all. I do believe there's one big giant cabal there in Hollywood that a lot of these guys are in the know. I'm very unforgiving with them, but at the same time, one has to always say, take each individual case as it goes. But then getting on to the more deeper question of the esoteric stuff is, I sum it up like this. One of the most important things to always remember when you're dealing with the multimedia here, and especially the people who create video games and all of this media, visual media, is that we would be in a dire strait, psychotic state if they weren't able to drip feed us some of the archetypal symbolism that they've also raped us of by the other hand. In order to get the slave to be the slave, you had to rape him through his life, through centuries of time, on this archetypal level. You've got to put 50-foot steel doors between him and his true self, or you have to shut down the right brain. There's many ways of languaging this. You have to shut down his aesthetic appreciation, like we talked about Nietzsche saying you have to open it up again. But what they have discovered, to their horror, is that if you do that, then you basically have a psychotic creature on your hands. Now, they don't mind that to a degree, but the psychotic has still got to get into his car every day and go down there and push the wheel. He's still got to breed a new generation of slaves and whatever else, you see, to run the entire planet. So they only want a certain neurotic individual so fucked up that he won't be able to do his inner homework to find his spiritual core. But he shouldn't be so crazed out, so lost, that he can't perform his duties for Big Brother. So what they do then is they send you down to the cinema, or they put these, because they know that the food of the mind must be symbolic. You're missing this whole archive inside yourself that they have suppressed. They've raped whole nations, man. I'm talking about the wholesale rape of entire groups of people, not just the Druids, but many other powerful Gnostic spiritual groups who used to teach people this, who very much were using symbolism, who were trying to awaken this aesthetic sense, or had it awakened. So we have had centuries of purgation, so that your modern man is utterly vagrant, utterly cut off from these symbolic roots. I mean, Carl Jung went blue in the face talking about this. And so they've realized that is made man very weak. So by creating this aesthetic movement and putting in it so many deep archetypal ancient, look at the movie The Fountain. Look how much the Tree of Life, I'm obsessed with this
Tried to
concept.
watch that. That was a weird movie.
Remember that? And then
We tried watching that, and that movie was just so odd.
Yeah, very, very, very bizarre movie. Now, one of the central themes in it is this Tree of Life. I mean, I'm obsessed with that. I've got a whole thing coming out on that. I've got a whole appendices on it. I mean, and there it is in this movie. It takes central place, not just in this movie, but the religious symbolism of the Tree of Life goes back unbelievably how many thousands of years. You can find it in the earliest Babylonian symbolism. It's right there in the book of Genesis. And here it is as a central character, in this modern film with all this archetypal symbolism around it. So the people who do this, they know that they have to every now and again give you that. I think a good parallel would be, isn't it, that when you're a drug addict, like a heroin addict, and if you declare that you are, you can get free needles and they like inject you with some of the heroin or something. Is that what they do?
I don't know, Dave.
That they don't do that in the States, but they do that in some parts of the world. Yeah.
Right. Well, they give
Yeah,
you a little.
they give in the States, they give heroin addicts methadone.
Well, that's what they're basically doing with this. For me, when you see this, they're reinvigorating you, like putting I don't know the metaphor of drugs or the metaphor of when you're falling into a complete state of sleep. They give you those. They put that sulfur in front of your nose, and you wake up sort of again.
Yeah, smelling sulfur. So
yeah, exactly. It's that's what it is. It's reminding you. It's re-emboldening you. Not enough for you to really get aware again. Although, believe me, some people do get very inspired by this. But on the whole, it's just, get out your popcorn, go and watch something here, fascinating Star Wars, whatever, good versus evil, or all the things we know that these movies contain. Throw in a bunch of great symbolism, alchemy, like the end of Star Trek 1, where there's this an amazing meeting of man and woman together, where they transcend and go in to become one, like, so there we have a concept I hope your audience is familiar with, androgyny. It turns up endlessly in movies. Very ancient, very powerful, ancient alchemical motif that is embedded in the unconscious. So at the end of that movie, they have this amazing scene where the male and the female literally blend together. You have exactly the same type of scene at the end of Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula, where when she cuts off the head of the count, he dies, and then she kills herself, and there's or some sort of spiritual nucleation of the male and female, and then the last thing you see is this angelic, androgynous ascent, like a transfiguration taking place, you see. And you have it over and over and over again in various films, this concept of androgyny. And, I try to go list these motifs that they're using all the time. The tree of life, the red-headed woman, the red-dressed woman, the woman in the red dress, or whatever it might be, the checkered floor, you name it. These are there because they need to keep you somewhat archetypally, I'm looking for the word, like nutrients, or it's nourished.
Right. Gotcha.
To an extent, just so that you're not so malnutrited that you can't function, That's what it is. But it certainly isn't so that the whole world, they're itching to enlighten the world. Maybe you get that through another kind of movie like V for Vendetta. There are certain movies that do fall into the category. I'm not.
Matrix, V for Vendetta.
Yeah. I'm not, and even The Truman Show. I'm certainly saying that those are movies that are highly artistic, designed to awaken the aesthetic sense, certainly designed to turn you on to some greater, more metaphysical motifs. There's no doubt in my mind that's the fact. But there are a lot of other movies as well that are doing the opposite. They're sorcery. They're there to inspire. They're an agenda from what's called the Dionysian cult, or the group that and you mentioned earlier that you watched My Age of Manipulation, so you know that I went into this in great detail, not to mention the more sordid satanic cults that are involved, but just in general this cult of Dionysus, whose job it is to put solar cult, androgynous celebs in front of us, the Mick Jaggers, David Bowies, who else? Jim Morrison, that kind of thing, yeah. And the even more ridiculous versions today. That's another version, again, to keep an iconic. These men, solar children, represent Mithras. They actually represent the very gods that these Illuminati adore. And when I mean adore, I mean worship. I mean really worship these guys. So they will make a little myth. They'll create a hero, like an Elvis or whoever, and that being will jump through the hoops in the very same way that you were speaking of Jim Carrey doing, will live out in his movies or his music or in some other even scenario, will live out the life drama of one of these potentates that they actually worship. Like literally live out the life of Horus, or live out of course it'll be in symbolic form.
Sun symbolism in the case of Elvis, right?
There you go. Right. Absolutely. And again, some of it happens autonomously, and the rest of it is very contrived. I'd say that now it's almost entirely contrived. But remember, even if it wasn't contrived, this happens. Myths happen. So they've noticed this. They've noticed that in ancient times it happened automatically, and now all they do is they just make a sort of a simulacra, a simulated version, so that all the girls or whatever will identify with it or whatever, and the fashions will start up, and then whatever it might be. They know that the certain kind of psyche that is more eclectic, that's more synthetic, that's more right brain, put these heroes in front of the media, in the commercials, in the Levi ads, and you name it, all in the magazines, and that will do the trick. And people will not have a faintest idea what is being communicated by way of these advertisements for jeans or whatever it might be. It's just unbelievable when you get into it. And if you've seen My Age of Manipulation, you'll know that it's like such. I think you said earlier yourself, it's such a huge field. How can any one DVD or presentation cover it? One of my biggest problems is people always emailing me going, "Oh, yeah, I wish you'd have talked more about that." It's me, yeah, I wish I could have done, but there's only so many hours I can even I can stand up on a stage, but without dropping. It's just so lengthy, it's so in depth, and then again, I can't do it all. My point is to make a lot of suggestions and show people the way, but really they got to go up and do it themselves. I provided the information, I provided the sources. People need to get into it and really understand how this works, for two reasons. One is to take the power away from the sorcerer, and two is to use it yourself for positive reasons.
I had a question for you. It's kind of maybe a little bit of a personal question. I see a lot of similarities in electronic dance music today and like ancient tribal sounds, and I was just wondering, do you personally listen to electronic music?
Yeah, I like trance music a lot. I like the Orb and the Future Sounds of London, and
Yes.
even Tangerine Dream, and a certain amount of like a Vangelis, and even what's his name? Oh, there's so many.
Yeah. Oh, I'm a big fan of trance music and like a lot more psychedelic, like the harder, you know what I'm saying, like almost like an infected mushroom.
Yeah, and electronic. I like industrial. I like industrial music. Sure, I like it. In fact, I like any music that has that mantric rhythmic stuff. Whether it's in a more industrial metal type of thing or even more trance music. I adore that kind of music a lot. I listen.
Like more symphonic. Well, I'm a musician. That's why I wanted to ask that question, because I heard the song that you played during the Free Your Mind with the symbolism, and you're like, you had the different pictures and one was going into another, and you can see the correlations through all these symbols, and that's what sparked my question.
Yeah, I try to put as much of that music into my own documentaries as possible because I listen to it a lot, and it's very right brain. It's very stream of consciousness, and it's music that allows you to dive in, where you're more personally involved. It's not linear, and it's not a song necessarily with lyrics or structured, sort of 3-minute song or whatever. So it allows you to go in there, and it's why I like it a lot is because I work so hard that if I play just 3-minute songs, you go stir crazy listening, even songs you really like.
Yeah.
Whereas if you put on the trance music, it's different every time. Every time you put that same piece on, you're hearing more in it, and it doesn't become as boring.
Yeah, of course. Like you hear the different layerings of the different sounds and
you're
how
always
they
hearing
just come
different
together.
things. For instance, when I used to do retail, when working in bookstores and what have you, we'd always try to slip the trance music on when the boss was out, because then your day goes by faster. Because if you're listening to these very formulaic kinds of music, it becomes very monotonous, and you almost feel more tense.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Well, hey, we've pretty much almost taken up 2 hours of your time, but it's been great, eye-opening, very inspiring. One other quick question I had easy to answer is, excluding your own work, just for the sake of the question, what would you say, if you had to narrow it down, would be the 3 most important books that someone could read?
Well, certainly top of the list would be, like, in my eyes, I'd say that Dr. John Coleman, any of his work is highly recommended. A book by Webster Tarpley and Lyndon LaRouche crowd called Dope Incorporated, because it specifically shows you the British connections of how America is run by the British oligarchy. That is a piece that is so important to know about. It not only takes you back to the time of the Constitution, what have you, but it also explains what's going on in today's world, who these presidents are, how they come to power, the kind of treachery. It also explains where these federal orgs come about and the world control from an American point of view. And why I say this is because Americans are usually quite well up to speed on the that there is a conspiracy. They beat the world knowing that there's a conspiracy, but many of them have not made the transition yet to know how the British aristocracy